So let's talk about writing the conclusion. Writing the conclusion is necessary to creating the framework for your papers. In many ways, the conclusion is the mirror image of the introduction, but with some slight differences. When you write a conclusion, what you need to do is repeat the thesis statement from your introduction. 2, repeat the topic sentences from the body. We haven't talked about that yet, but we'll get there. 3, you want to repeat your findings, your synthesis from the body of the text. Basically, if you were able to summarize anything from all the evidence that you've discussed, you need to repeat that again in the conclusion. Finally, and this is optional, you need to suggest future directions for other papers or for other explorations into this topic. That's a value add, okay? So it's not necessary. But if your paper has future lines of inquiry that you can suggest, that makes it that much more worth reading, okay? And part of what you're doing here is selling your paper as having been worth my time to read. So let's jump right into the examples. So you need to repeat the thesis statement. Now I'm going to stick with the heart disease example from now on, okay? This paper examined the effects of psychosocial stress on the development of heart disease. That is nearly a word-for-word repetition. That's allowed in academic writing. You never want to repeat something verbatim, so don't repeat exactly the same words, but you are absolutely allowed to repeat the general gist of any given sentence if it's a sentence that's important to your framework. Then you want to repeat your topic sentences from the body. Again, not verbatim, but you want to bring out the same information using the same keywords or technical terms that you used in the body. So, we examined the literature on job stress, family stress, and major life events on the development of heart disease. You notice a lot of these words come back. There's a lot of repetition in academic writing. That's acceptable in this form of writing. More than acceptable, it's necessary. It's encouraged. This is the kind of thing that you don't want to start using synonyms on. You don't want to start saying, we examined the literature on, workplace conflict and divorce and bereavement and, job loss, instead of saying job stress, family stress, and major life events. You really want to stick with your terminology. That's very important. And we'll bring this up again in a future lecture. Once you've repeated your main thesis statement and your main structure, reminding the reader exactly what you just did, you then want to repeat your findings from the body. So we found that most of these factors were associated with heart disease. However, family stress, in particular divorce and bereavement, was associated with worsened disease profiles. Now you're allowed to say divorce and bereavement because now you've clearly indicated to the reader that that was part of the evidence that you explored having to do with family stress. You need to keep these things very clear. Finally, suggest future directions. Future research could be done to examine the effect of social support during a loss on heart disease development. Future directions means if you have found something through your research, if you have found something through the evidence that you've managed to come up with that suggests that your question might have been a little bit off mark, or that another question might yield some very interesting findings, then you put that in your future directions. Okay, in this example, basically, I said, okay, family stress is important, but in particular, what we really were talking about with family stress was divorce or bereavement, okay? So then I talk about the value add. Future research could be done specifically on that topic. Writing the conclusion involves repeating your thesis statement, your topic sentences, so repeating your structure and creating an echo in the paper, and repeating your findings. Finally, if there's something interesting that you want to put as a future direction or a value add, you close with the value add. That way, you've really created a good pattern in your paper, whereas you have your intro that introduces your structure, you have your conclusion that reminds your reader of the structure, and you've repeated kind of the important pieces of information from your body. So when you put it all together, it looks pretty good. This paper examined the effects of psychosocial stress on the development of CAD. We examined the literature on job stress, family stress, and major life events. We found that most of these factors were associated with CAD. However, family stress, in particular divorce and bereavement, was associated with worsened disease profiles. In conclusion, psychosocial stress plays a big role in the development of CAD. Future research could be done to examine the effect of social support during a loss on CAD development. Now, you see from this kind of pulled together conclusion that in fact the place where you've expressed your opinion or point of view was in one of the last lines, was in one of the final lines of the conclusion. In conclusion, psychosocial stress plays a big role in the development of CAD. That's really been the thesis statement all along. That's been the point of view or the opinion that you've been trying to justify. Remember, the introduction is about introducing the topic. You don't necessarily come out and state your point of view very strongly in the introduction, but you can do it here in the conclusion. So, to recap, when you write the conclusion, what you're doing is that you're repeating your thesis statement from the introduction. Then you're repeating your structure from the body. You're reminding the reader, okay, this is what we talked about, this is what I did. Finally, you're repeating your main findings. So the main take-home message from your evidence, from what the cargo you've managed to put into the body of the text. Finally, you're hitting the reader with your conclusion, your opinion. Then, if you have a future directions, if you have a value add, here's the place to put it. In the next lecture, we're going to be discussing how to write the body, and that's going to be all about how you package the cargo of facts and evidence that you've come up with so that it receives optimal consideration from the reader.